Hey, Slapdawg! The Brainiacs are ready!
Welcome in to Leather Brains. Your host here, Slapdawg, and you are listening to episode 155. Baby, it is hump day. Welcome in to a fun-filled episode. We're going to do some Monday night cleanup here, and then we're going to talk about the playoff pictures. We're going to talk about NFL teams and the ones that are going to make it to the playoffs, the ones that might make it to the playoffs, and then maybe we'll have some conversations about the ones that don't. And then we're going to play some Flex Appeal with my boy Yeti, and then do Brainbusters and get out of here. So, Yeti, happy Wednesday, man. How you been? We didn't see you last week. Man. It's good to have you here.
Yeah, good to be back. You know, I'm happy to be here, but I'm also kind of sad because Slaps, it's week 15. We're going on to week 15. We have 3 weeks of relevant football to play, and then we're off to the playoffs. No more fantasy.
Playoffs, baby. I gotta ask. Did you make it to the bye week? Are you living La Vida Loca? Are you kicking your feet up? Hanging out, man. Having a margarita. Where are you at in fantasy football in your leagues?
Yeah, so I'm in 4 leagues personally. In 1 league, I missed the playoffs. I'm in the toilet bowl.
It happens.
But the other 3, I have a bye. So I think the ratio is pretty good. I don't know.
I would say so. Congratulations to you, my friend.
Thanks,
It is one of the best feelings when you do have that security and you just don't even have to set a lineup if you don't want to. You just hang out and there's no stress. There's no reason to worry about starting X player or Y player, figure out who the matchups are. You get to kick your feet up and relax. I've only had it happen once and it was the best feeling.
Maybe you should listen to Leather Brains podcast.
Maybe I should. I missed the playoffs this year in our league of record by less than 10 points. If I would have started a different kicker, Brandon Aubrey, notably, which is the biggest amount of bullshit because we sit here and preach that kickers do not belong in fantasy football. I run a very fair league in which it's democratic. We vote. Everybody gets their say. And every year I try and get rid of kickers, and every year somebody says no, and lo and behold, I lost because of kickers. And I just think it's complete bullshit. But you know what? I hope everybody else that is listening has made it to the playoffs in their leagues. And if you haven't, but made it to the playoffs, but you didn't get that first round bye, tune in because we're going to play some Flex Appeal and we're going to talk about some interesting spot start flex guys that are going to be very beneficial for everybody here in just a little bit. But like I said, Yeti, before we do any of that, we got to talk about Monday night, man. So this entire last week is pretty significant, to be honest with you. There were 6 different division leaders within the NFL that lost this last week, and that being the Falcons, the Lions, Jaguars, Chiefs, Eagles, and Dolphins. What were your initial thoughts with this? I thought I was pretty shocked by this. That's a lot of division leaders that lost this last week. And in your mind, what does this do for the playoff implications?
Yeah, this has to be one of the craziest years of NFL football because it seems like you and we talked about this before we went live. It just seems like nobody really wants to win. Like all the supposed to be good teams are finding ways to lose, whether it's because their wide receivers can't line up correctly, they're dropping balls or injuries, whatever the case may be. It just seems like there is a huge disparity in this league going on when you compare the past few years of Joe Burrow matchups with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Like, we're not seeing that this year. We're not seeing those top level performances or top level matchups, I should say. Even the ones that we're supposed to get excited for, like San Francisco versus Philly, that was a complete blowout. So it's like, what is going on right now? And I think last week was a prime example of what's going on in this league of it's a hot potato. Like, we don't want to be good this week. You go be good,
Yeah,
like,
and it's shown for fantasy too. Like fantasy football this year, I implore everybody that is listening or watching to go to Fantasy Pros and pull up the league leader for running backs this year.
Free plug.
And yeah, we don't usually do that. But go pull them up and look at like the top 10 running backs in fantasy this year. And then look at their ADP. Look at where they were drafted. Some of these running backs were not even drafted. And same thing for wide receivers. Those that drafted Cooper Kupp early. He's not in the top 10. Where's Justin Jefferson? He got hurt. He's out for the season. Jamar Chase hasn't even been a top 3 wide receiver this year. So, like, Fantasy has been a dumpster fire, and that largely being because the NFL has also been a dumpster fire. While we're talking about dumpster fires, do we want to talk about the Dolphins and the fact that they blew a 15-point lead this last Monday against Tennessee?
Oof.
Big oof. Mike Vrabel, did he ensure that he might have another year of coaching under his belt with this win here and the fact that he could get this team to maybe go over 500?
Oh, I don't know if they'll go over 500 this year, but I think you have to like what you see from Will Levis. Because, yeah, he struggles, but what rookie quarterback doesn't have struggles unless your name is CJ Stroud? And I think going through these struggles are a very necessary evil in the league that not many people have patience with. So I love what they're doing right now with Levis. They could easily just put Tannehill back in and say, all right, go give us the best chance to win. But they're letting Levis kind of figure it out, go through the struggles, and hopefully be better next year. I do think Vrabel is safe for next year. I think he's going to be a hot seat candidate if they get off to a rocky start, though, just with how loaded that division seemed to be overnight with Trevor Lawrence, Anthony Richardson, and CJ Stroud.
So before I know I had mentioned Vrabel, but I just want to touch on Will Levis for just a moment here. He threw for 327 yards this last week, and I don't know if you saw the clip. Then Mike Vrabel was getting interviewed, and the the interviewer had asked him like, "Hey, what'd you think about Will Levis?" Yada yada yada, and he's like, I don't know what he's watching, but if he continues to try and truck stick people, he's going to get the shit kicked out of him, is essentially what he said. And I just thought it was comical. But I remember watching this game, and I remember Will Levis just lowering his shoulder when he was scrambling and tried to truck someone. And I'm like, not the smartest move out of your quarterback, but I love to see it. I like that dog in him. And I was like, that guy's got some dog, baby.
Man, even when he threw that pick six in the first quarter, and I think a D lineman picked him off, and Will Levis threw his shoulder into him.
Yeah,
like, man, that's a 300-pound dude.
What are you doing? But also fucking cool. But stop it. But cool. But stop. I did like that. And really, what I think about this is good for Mike Vrabel. Good for Mike Vrabel to put Will Levis in this situation, because what's the alternative? Like you mentioned, you could put Ryan Tannehill out there and say, man, hopefully you can get it done for me. But we know what Ryan Tannehill is. We have seen what Ryan Tannehill is. And so let's move on. Let's close that chapter. You know that he is not a long-term solution for your team any longer. And so the season's a wash. You're not going to make it to the playoffs. You're probably not going to go over 500. Put the rookie in and let's see, does he have what it takes for me, A, to continue with my tenure here with the Titans, but also B, be a serviceable quarterback that maybe we can build around in some way, shape, or form to continue to try and stay competitive. So I like that move by Vrabel. I think sometimes head coaches don't do that, and I think part of the conversation there is, are we still in playoff contention? There's a lot more that goes on with that conversation, and it's all very team dependent and situational dependent. But I really like this for Mike Vrabel because he could just say, hey, I want to put the guy out there that's going to give me the best shot to win right now, and that probably is Ryan Tannehill. But he's thinking about the future, and I like that from Vrabel, so I just wanted to point that out.
Since we are a fantasy podcast, I want to ask you something.
Okay.
It's a dynasty-related question, but after Will Levis's performance, he kind of went up a little bit according to Keep Trade Cut. They have a whole ranking system.
Yeah.
So his ranking went up a little bit, and he's kind of in the category with Bryce Young and Deshaun Watson right now, as far as where his value is leveled out at.
Sure.
Would you rather have Will Levis or Bryce Young for dynasty formats?
Between the two of them?
Yeah. Yep.
God, I think I'd rather just not play dynasty football if those were my two quarterbacks. I mean,
yeah, draft better next year.
Yeah, freaking A, man. I probably Will Levis, which is interesting to think about, but I think about long-term solutions for Bryce Young, and it's a very bleak existence. And it truthfully is. You look at the Panthers, and Frank Reich wasn't the answer before they hired him, and then they hired him, and then they traded away DJ Moore, and they made that crazy trade to the Bears to get Bryce Young. And then they came out afterwards and they said, hey, we want to get a wide receiver one for our quarterback. And it's like, no shit, you had a wide receiver one, and you gave him to the Bears to get this guy. Not only that, but you gave away future draft capital. And so I look at this situation, and it's kind of comical. the Chargers offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, is supposedly one of the high prospects that the Panthers want to try and bring over to the Panthers. And Kellen Moore had said, there's not a lot that gets me excited about the Panthers. And it's hilarious to hear, but it's also true. Like, what do they have? They have no talent. They have no picks that are juicy picks that are going to help them get immediate talent to fill holes that they very clearly have within both their offense and their defense. And so the future is bleak for Bryce Young. You look at Will Levis, and while the Titans do have some holes they need to fill, they also still have the draft capital, and they have a very reputable, good head coach in Mike Vrabel. The Panthers don't even have a head coach. And so they have a lot of issues that they need to resolve. At this point, I would rather have Will Levis with a competent team and some future hopefuls than the dumpster fire that is the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And not only do the Tennessee Titans have draft capital, but they do have D-Hop. I think he's tied to Tennessee for a couple more years, probably until he retires.
He's getting old.
Yeah, he is getting old, but at least, he's not up to Adam Thielen level bad yet.
Sure. And, like, you didn't say Traylon Burks.
Do I need to? I don't even know if he's a wide receiver too on that offense.
No, and I was just kind of pulling your strings, but no, I get it, and neither of them are sexy. Neither of them I get super excited about. But if I had to choose in a vacuum, I would be taking Will Levis over Bryce Young at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it takes two to tango in this game, right?
Yeah.
But the Dolphins, they lose this game. But they also lost a bunch of key pieces in this game. Tyreek Hill, he got hurt, high ankle sprain, came back to the game late when they were trying to, mount the comeback. But they also lost 3 starting offensive linemen.
That's
one is out with a torn ACL for the season, and the other 2 are kind of just questionable going into this week. So this Miami team is going into the postseason with a wounded roster at this point. But I want to touch on Tyreek Hill just real quick. His injury situation. He got hurt by a horse collar / hip drop tackle. And this season, we've heard a bunch about hip drop tackles. We've seen countless players get hurt because the defender dropped their hip and they just bended the player backwards. And I've heard a lot of people, or just the media in general, they're saying that the hip drop tackle should be banned. So I wanted to get your thoughts if the hip drop tackle should be banned from the NFL.
It's funny you say this because right before we clicked record, I had a notification on my phone that said Roger Goodell says we need to do something about the hip drop tackle in the offseason. I don't know if I agree. I really don't. And the problem being is this. We all sit around our TVs on a Sunday all day. Most of us. The degenerates like myself do. And I sit there and we glorify this sport because it is violent. Because it is violent, it is explosive. There is crazy things that happen every single Sunday and Monday and Thursday and whatever. Well, unless you're the Chargers Patriots, but that's why we glorify the sport, right? And so over the years, they have done things to remove the violence, which is fine. And I'm not saying like violence for the sake of violence, because that I don't agree with that. But they're doing things to try and help prevent concussions. I respect that. I agree with that. But this game is a violent game, and over the years, they are slowly removing all of the violence from their product. It's interesting to me what happens when you can't tackle anybody at all in football, and that becomes a conversation. I'm not saying I don't know what the right or the wrong answer is. I truly don't. But to sit there and say you can't tackle a guy a certain way, like everything happens in this game so fast, so unbelievably fast. And these defenders, I feel bad for them at times because some of it is self-incurred and they're being assholes and they're doing things they shouldn't do. But like also some of it is just natural instinct. You have to bring the guy to the ground. You're trying to get the ball. You're trying to pick the ball. You're trying to cover a guy. Like this game happens in a matter of milliseconds, and choices that you make on the field, you have to just go with them, And so to remove the hip drop, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it. Not because I think that I do want to protect the players, and if there's a way to do that, I'm fine with that, but I don't want to penalize a guy for just trying to bring a guy down. You know what I mean? And that's where I have a problem with it. And I don't know what the right solution is, but I don't want to just remove things for the sake of removing them because some people don't like the way they look.
Right. I am 100% in the same boat as you. And I had texted something in our group chat over the weekend that I think the NFL and rule makers are trying to make this game way more complicated than it needs to be. And if you enforce a rule that says, hey, if you hip drop tackle a player, that's a 15-yard penalty, or, you know, whatever they want to do with it, then there creates a lot of gray area. Because if you look at what they did with quarterbacks, you can't tackle a quarterback with your full weight. Sometimes that gets called and like it's obvious. Sometimes it gets called and the player like barely like lands on them.
Yeah.
So it creates a lot of like what's okay and what's not okay. And I think you can get those two confused very easily with a hip drop tackle because, you know, fortunately for us as viewers, players are getting faster, stronger, taller, you know, and defenders have to find a way to get these guys to the ground. What you know, what are they supposed to do? Are we gonna just start playing flag football? Like that's safe, right? So let's just put flags on fucking everybody instead of having to worry about how we're tackling people.
No, and like, you know, everybody's talking about this the Kadarius Toney play with the Chiefs where he lined up in the neutral zone and it got called. He was in the neutral zone. Like he was. And Alan and Scotty, who are both on Monday's show, they said the same thing. The play should have been called. That is something that you can sit there and say with no question, it should have been called. Like there is no black and white. If you line up in this zone, it should be called. Now, whether it is being called is a separate conversation. But as far as black or white, if the guy's lined up there, the flag should be thrown. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. But when it comes to something like this, like a hip tackle, like where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line with the quarterbacks who well, did that player tackle him with his full weight? It looks like he might have. Let me throw the flag. And then that changes the outcome of the game potentially. So I don't think I want that. I don't think I want that because while I do want to protect the players, I also don't want to give more ambiguity to the refs to make those, well, maybe not calls. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And it would be different if the referees weren't under so much scrutiny already, but to give them the ability to fuck up a game even more by saying, that kind of looked like a hip drop tackle, I'm going to throw the flag, regardless of if the offender got hurt or not. Like, it's just, I feel like the less power that we give referees, the better, because they just seem to want to control the games now.
They did. And I don't know. I mean, this is, you could have a whole conversation about the refs and whatnot. I think what needs to happen is AWS just needs to come in and they need to be the refs for the game. And then they can say, statistically, he was hitting him with over 50% of his body weight. We need to throw the flag.
Just put microchips on everybody, see how much weight they're actually using, how much force they're generating.
Yeah.
Easy. Solved.
There you go.
We solved the problem.
God,
boom.
Look at us solving the NFL's issues.
AWS.
While we're still talking about this Dolphins game, we kind of segued into something else, but what did you think about this Dolphins offense without Tyreek Hill? Because very obviously you saw this team struggle, right? Like this team was struggling. Tyreek Hill actually, he wasn't told to go back out there. He was not cleared to go back out there. Tyreek Hill actually said at the end of the game, I just went back out there because we needed to get something going. And I texted my wife and she said, get the hell back out there. And he said, you better give me a foot massage tonight. And he ran back out there and he started playing football again. With Tyreek Hill not on the field, this offense looked like it was kind of struggling. And I don't want to take anything away from Mike Vrabel. He is a defensive-minded coach, and the Titans typically, they play some good defense. That is what Mike Vrabel typically does with his Titans team. And they did that, but this offense struggled without Tyreek Hill. So what were your takeaways from this?
Yeah, it was very obvious from the get-go that Miami they need Tyreek Hill out there. They try to put Jalen Waddle in the same situation as Tyreek Hill, but the timing between Waddle and Tua was just off. And there's many reasons behind that, right? Tyreek is fast as fuck. You know, the timing is going to be off with Tua throwing the ball to a certain location, and you expect Tyreek to be there. And Waddle's fast too, right? But every wide receiver runs their routes differently. They run at different speeds. Tyreek might run at a slant route at 100% of his speed. Jalen Waddle might like jog. I don't know. I don't know, right? But from watching the game, the speeds were just completely different. They tried to utilize Waddle the same way. It just was not working. And it just goes to show you how important Tyreek Hill really is to this offense. You look at the stats from the season, Tyreek Hill has accounted for over 40% of Tua's passing yards. He's accounted for over 50% of Tua's passing touchdowns. Like, Miami needs Tyreek Hill to do anything effectively.
Do you think that's to the detriment of not only the Dolphins, but really Mike McDaniels? And I bring this up because this offense the Dolphins have made it Tyreek Hill's offense. Like, that's what they've done. What happened to Jalen Waddle? You know, like, Jalen Waddle's not a bad wide receiver. We've seen Jalen Waddle be successful before Tyreek Hill came in. Do you think maybe this is a knock on Mike McDaniel's coaching philosophy, that we're going to get this guy so hyper involved that we're going to forget about the other pieces that we have? I mean, you see the running game still has effectiveness with Raheem Mostert and Devon A-Chain. So really my question is, where's Jalen Waddle, and what do you think about the coaching decisions they've made for the offense scheming?
Well, I have two answers. One, I think when you have a generational player like Tyreek Hill, you do everything in your power to get him the ball. And obviously they have forgotten about Jalen Waddle in that situation, which is very unfortunate because Waddle could be a wide receiver one on anybody's team. You know, any other team would be happy to have him. And number two, I think with Tyreek Hill's lofty goal of getting 2,000 receiving yards, I really do think the team is just like buying into that. Like, let's get him to 2,000 yards. Let's do it. And I think Mike McDaniels, he's a goofy ass dude. So I could see him being like a nerd sitting there in the coaching office. Like, how can we get Tyreek Hill the ball? You know, like, we need to get him to the 2,000 yard mark. So, you know, if this injury taught Mike McDaniels anything, is that they need to get Jalen Waddle more involved in the short yardage, you know, get him comfortable, get him started early, you know, kind of like a basketball player. Start with a couple layups to get these guys warmed up, and then you hit them with a home run. I think they need to do that with Jalen Waddle. Get him involved with slants. Get him involved in the screen game. Just get him going some kind of way. I'm not saying double-digit targets, but a little more than what he's seeing now, or else that offense as a whole is going to struggle, and we saw that Monday night without Tyreek Hill.
Last question on the Dolphins, and then we'll move on to the next topic that we've got teed up here. Dolphins go to the Super Bowl, Yeti?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that offense is going to travel well. And as it sits right now, they're going to have to go to Baltimore. And Baltimore's defense, they are a little banged up. I understand that. But you go to Baltimore in January, it's going to be cold. Nobody wants to play in the cold, especially when you're from Miami.
Outside in the cold.
Yeah, but aside from the weather, aside from traveling, I think this team has way too many concerns. Their defense is very leaky, and that offense is very suspect. You take out Tyreek Hill, and Tua looks like a different quarterback. This offense looks a lot different. They have a lot of speed, but there's not as many options without, you know, you take away Tyreek Hill, and it's very predictable offense.
Sure. No, and I agree with you. I don't think that they're Super Bowl bound. I think, you know, playoffs are going to get fun and interesting, but if we had to label the Dolphins as anything, I would say probably frauds is a fair term, because it's Tyreek Hill.
And I don't even think they're the best team in the AFC East right now.
Who would that be?
The Bills.
Ah, man. I mean, what other? Well, okay. Before we get into that, let's go over to the Giants. We had 2 Monday night games. It is hard to believe. The Giants spoiled the Packers' playoff hopes, did they not?
Yeah, man. Green Bay is technically still alive. They are in a 5-team tie for the final wild card spot in the NFC. Yikes. And all 5 teams are 6-7, so that just goes to show you how much of a clusterfuck the NFC is. But how about Tommy, I am more Italian than you, DeVito, going out there and just winning games, man. He is 3-1 as a starter. He has more wins than Bryce Young does.
Do you think Danny Dimes is sitting in the locker room sweating?
Not when you're getting $40 million a year. You're kind of just chilling.
Touche. Did you see Tommy DeVito's agent He looks exactly like what you would want his agent to look like. Like it was, we retweeted on Twitter. Go check us out on Leatherbrains there, and you might have to scroll a little bit, but there is a picture of him and his dad, and they're both cheering in the crowd, and I'm just like, that dude looks like someone who should be Tommy DeVito's agent. So it was
he
pretty
looks
happy.
like he's straight out of a mob movie.
Oh,
Like,
it
he was
is
just
incredible.
made for TV.
Love
made
it.
for a movie.
Love it. But the Giants, I'm not wearing a hat that I can tip right now, but Brian Dable, man, he's not, I mean, like, way to come in and just disrupt. The Giants are not good, and I think the Giants, from a team perspective, have a lot of question marks to figure out, including Daniel Dimes. But the Packers, let's talk about them. What are your feelings on them, both in the short term this year and long term as a team? Like, they're a really young team, all things considered, right? And Jordan Love, I think, has shown flashes of what he could be and should be the starting quarterback, in my opinion, for the Packers going forward. What do you think about him?
I think short-term wise, there is a lot to be concerned about. I don't think they are a playoff caliber team, and I say that because they played on Monday night and they look like they got hit by a bus. Like they just weren't ready for a primetime game. And if they were to make the postseason, whoever they would face the Cowboys right now as it stands. And I bet the Cowboys would wax their ass. Like that game would just not be fun. But I think long-term wise, you mentioned they are a very young team. And I think they are set up for success for next year, especially if you look at what the NFC North looks like. There's question marks with Chicago. What are they going to do with their quarterback? Minnesota's in the same exact situation. And Detroit, they're gettable. They're leading the NFC North right now, but you could say that they're fraudulent as well.
Sure.
For the short term, I had mentioned that Green Bay's in a 5-team tie for the final wild card spot. They are tied with the Rams, the Seahawks, the Falcons, and the Saints. So of these 5 teams, including the Packers, which one do you think is likely to get that last wild card spot? Or which team are you hoping gets that spot?
We're talking about the playoffs, baby, so let's just do it. I mean, looking at the teams, Packers, Rams, Seahawks, Falcons, and Saints, who's likely to get the 7th seed is your question. Is that right?
Yep.
It's got to be the Rams. I really do think it's the Rams. The Rams, I have a lot of respect for Sean McVay. I really do. The Rams are always find a way to be competitive, even with they decided to sell the whole house and not have any future draft stock, and they're still getting it done. They have the Commanders this next week, and then they have the Saints, which are both very winnable games for them. And after that, they have, sorry, I'm just pulling it up here. They have the Giants. I mean, there's a very good possibility and probability that they win these next 3 games. And then they have the 49ers. And even if they lose, I think they're still within wild card contention. So it's got to be the Rams for me. I think the Rams are a good team. They're a good coach team. Matthew Stafford is still slinging the ball like a mother effer and doing it really well. I got the Rams as for these teams, they're likely to get the 7th seed, in my opinion.
Yep. I agree with you, and I brought a backup just in case we did agree. I think the Seahawks are another team
they were my second one. Yeah.
They played the Eagles on Monday night, but after that they played Tennessee, they played the Steelers and the Cardinals. So it's a very friendly schedule, and I think they might even have a chance of beating Philly this week after how Philly has looked the past few weeks. Honestly, anybody could pull up 20 points on that offense. I think even the Patriots could at this point.
Okay, but no, let's not get crazy. But talking about the Seahawks-Eagles game, I do think that they're like that game. I have the Eagles winning the game. I think they will. I think there's going to be some anger and some fury, and they're going to try and prove a point. But the Seahawks aren't a bad team. The Seahawks are not a bad team, and I think that could get really spicy, and it could get more interesting than I think a lot of people at the surface level realize. So, yeah, the Seahawks for me are another team that I think could do it. But if I was betting money, and you know I'm a D-gen, I'm going to take the Rams to get into the playoffs. I think they are still a good team. So,
yeah, and let's flip the coin and let's look at the AFC side real quick, Slaps.
Okay.
So aside from Baltimore, which AFC team do you think has a realistic shot of beating San Francisco in the Super Bowl?
Yet I've said this before within the last few weeks. I don't think anybody's beaten the 49ers in the Super Bowl. I don't. I placed a future bet a couple weeks ago that the 49ers were going to win it all because I truly do believe there is no other competition. There is nobody that is going to beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl. The 49ers are going to go to the Super Bowl, and they're going to win it all. I don't think there is any way with that roster and the way that they're playing that they do. If I had to sit here and pick, obviously the Ravens are the choice number one, but choice number two is the Chiefs. It is the Chiefs for me.
Yeah.
And I know you're a Raiders fan, and we have some Chiefs fans on this podcast. The Chiefs have not looked good this year in comparison to years past. But if there's anybody that gets it done in the last possible second, as we know and have been proven time and time again, it is Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And I don't want to write them off. I don't think they are the best team in the AFC this year. I do think that that's the Ravens. But because we're sitting here having a conversation about what ifs, you cannot write the Chiefs off. You can't.
Unfortunately, I do agree with you. Andy Reid is a mastermind, and he finds a way to get it done over and over again. But I want to throw an asterisk out and say that if the Bills were to win this week, the Bills beat the Cowboys, or they play the Cowboys this week, which is going to be a fun matchup. I think the Bills are very frisky. They might go from not being in the playoffs at all to being a potential top team in the playoffs. So the way that they're looking right now.
Sure. And they're another one. They have not really, they haven't got there yet, right? Like there's still a lot of question marks around the Bills. I do think that they are, if I was to pick any other team besides the Chiefs and the Ravens, of course, the Bills are probably it. Because I think they are a juggernaut. It's just what version of the Bills are you getting that week? And that's the question at hand that concerns me is I've seen the Bills when Josh Allen wants to play football and he's looking explosive and nothing is going to stop them. And their defense also looks pretty good at times. And then I've also seen the exact opposite where I've seen the Bills flounder and they've struggled against teams that you're like, what's going on here? Like, did you guys not study this week or watch film or what? You think this was going to be a cakewalk? It's still any given Sunday. So it really, the question at hand is what Bills team are we getting? And yeah. I think that, the Bills team they're going to realize like, hey, it's shit to get off the pot. And I think they're going to realize that they need to kind of step it up. And I think that's the version of the Bills we're going to continue to see until the playoffs, and then anything kind of goes because that's how the playoffs typically happen. So it wouldn't surprise me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and it's like the Bills need no expectations on them to succeed because right now they're just fighting to get on the playoffs, and nobody's looking at them like, oh, they're Super Bowl contenders right now. Whereas
sure.
At the beginning of the season, everyone's like, oh, Super
Bills,
Bowl contenders,
Bengals,
easy.
49ers. Yeah, I mean, you had all these powerhouse teams, and where are they? Where the Jets? I mean, Aaron Rodgers went down 4 plays into the game. So, and they were another team that was like, they're going to be Super Bowl favorites, and where are they now? So, I still think it's the Chiefs for me. That they're going to find a way. They always do, unfortunately. for everybody who has to sit there and watch the Chiefs every single time. But, I mean, I'm not a Chiefs hater. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I want to see somebody else get their shot and their turn. So, but regardless of who it is, I don't think anybody beats the 49ers. They're just too good.
Have you seen the conspiracy going around on Twitter about the Super Bowl?
I have not.
So if you look at the past 3 Super Bowl logos, they are all color-coded. And they are color-coded to match the teams that were in the Super Bowl that year. So last year, like Kansas City and Philly, the Arizona logo was a combination of their colors. This year, in the Vegas Super Bowl, the color combinations are purple and like a maroon. So people are like, oh, this is scripted. Like the Ravens are going to play the 49ers in the Super Bowl. It's already written. Like the script writers are leaking the script a little too early.
I mean, that is weird. Yeah. That is weird. And as people who are not privy to getting the script at the beginning of the season, and we can only sit here and speculate, that looks pretty weird. But they're also the top contending teams. So I
see you're buying.
What's going on, Roger Goodell?
Yeah.
No, it is weird. And I now that you mentioned, I have seen that before. I think more than anything else, it's probably coincidence, but it's still weird.
Let's hope.
All right. You want to play some flex appeal here? Is there
Let's
anything?
get
Well,
into it,
before we
babe.
do that, reminder for anybody that is currently competing still in fantasy football, there are 3 Saturday games. We have Vikings, Bengals, Steelers, Colts, and Broncos, Lions. So make sure to set your lineups. We have 3 Saturday games. Why do we have 3 Saturday games this week?
Man, why not? We got football Thursday, we got football Saturday, we got football Sunday, and we got football on Monday. Basically 4 days out of the week. Let's
Dude.
go.
I have my Sunday, like my whole life revolves around Sundays sitting on the couch doing nothing. So it really throws me for a loop when we have Saturday football, because then I feel like I'm just glued to the couch all weekend.
Yeah, I told my wife there was football on Saturday, and she just kind of like glared at me like,
Stared at me,
seriously.
you son of a bitch. No,
Yeah, sorry.
I do it. So
I do it for
just
the pod.
Amen, baby. All right, let's get over to flex appeals. So we are flexing 2 different players against each other to compete to see which one you should put in your lineups this week. Yeti, why don't you start this?
Yeah, so for all the people who made it to the first round of the fantasy playoffs, congratulations. And we're going to give you some tough ass flex appeal options because some people might be dealing with this choice right now. So, Slaps, I'm sorry to do this to you,
okay.
but
It's okay.
my first flex appeal option, Drake
pretty gross.
London versus Carolina or Rashee Rice versus New England.
It is really gross what you did here, because I don't like either of these options, and I would prefer to find different options. But the fact that you gave him here, so the Panthers, they're neck and neck really with each other here. As far as what I'm looking at is, I'm looking at the point differential between these 2 defenses, right? And are these defenses allowing it? And the Panthers and the Chiefs are neck and neck as far as points allowed to the wide receiver position. I am probably going to take. I'm leaning Drake London, which scares me. And I don't love that pick, but I got to pick somebody here. I'm probably going to take Drake London. I think he is the true wide receiver 1 for this team. But Rashee Rice is also being more and more involved as well. So I'm going to take Drake London, and the reason being is because I'm afraid of Bill Belichick. So I'm going to take Drake London. I'm not going to deal with it. I think Rashee Rice is still in play for some people, and he is the wide receiver 1 for this team. But I think that Bill Belichick is going to scheme not only him, but Travis Kelce and make it difficult. I'll take Drake London.
You're chasing after that blow-up week. That's exactly what you're doing here because
I am.
Drake London, he hasn't seen double-digit targets since week 6. And last week he saw 11 targets. He had the blow-up game for nearly 30 PPR points. That's all. That's great. That's great. I'm happy for Drake London, but Rashee Rice.
I'm not. I just want to stay. I'm not. Fuck you, Arthur Smith. I think you're a piece of shit.
Rashee Rice. He kind of he turned the corner after week 7. The Chiefs, they started playing him more than 50% of the snaps as he got more comfortable in their scheme and everything as a rookie wide receiver. And since week 7, when his snap share went up, he's actually the wide receiver 18 on the season. So he's turned it on halfway through the season, and he's averaging 9.5 targets the past few weeks. So
does Bill Belichick scare you?
No, because he has to worry about Travis Kelce.
Do
Travis
you really,
Kelce is still the option, number 1 option on this team. I think they do what they can to get rid of Travis Kelce. Because if you get him going, him and Mahomes is night and day. You know, that's a slam dunk.
Okay, fine. Do Rashee Rice. I was pretty indifferent and go with what Yeti said because he brought the metrics to back it up. I present to you this first one here. Jaylen Warren versus the Steelers. Or he is with the Steelers.
They play Indy.
Thank you. Or A.J. Dillon versus Tampa Bay.
I know. I was preparing my show notes for this one, and I was like, "Huh, you really?"
I was just reading the header thing, and I knew they were playing the Colts, but I wrote it down wrong, and then I panicked and was like, "I look like an idiot here because I can't remember who they're playing." So my bad.
I got you. My
apologies. Thank you.
This is gross because both of the starters are questionable. Yeah. Najee Harris, he's questionable with the knee. Aaron Jones is questionable with old age syndrome. Basically, it comes down to who starter is going to be out. The matchup makes me want to take Jaylen Warren because Indy, they have allowed the fourth most points to running backs over the past 5 weeks, giving up 27.8 PPR points. So I love that matchup. But if Najee is there, Jaylen Warren's going to be splitting the carries versus Aaron Jones. If Aaron Jones is out, AJ Dillon's going to get all the workload.
Let's say hypothetically, both of the starters are out.
Oh, then it's easy. Jaylen Warren.
Okay. Let's say both the starters are in.
I think I go Jaylen Warren still.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, then there you go. I agree with you. For everything you just mentioned, I had those stats written down too. The Colts defense is incredibly leaky at the running position or the running back position. And you got to, I mean, Jaylen Warren has been one of those guys that has been like a spot start flex guy for a lot of people all season. So he is pretty consistently in my flex appeals when we bring him to the table because I own him in a couple leagues and I often struggle with that. And I feel like anybody who owns him is kind of in the same boat where it's like, do I start him this week? Do I not? And he still has usability even when Najee is on the field because they do split time. So AJ Dillon kind of scares me. I think regardless, I would be going Jaylen Warren in this situation as well.
Yeah, 100%, man. My next flex appeal option for you slaps. Okay. It's we're getting nastier as we go on. Tyler Lockett versus Philly or Chuba Hubbard versus Atlanta.
That's pretty gross, dude. That's pretty gross because the way to beat the Eagles is through the air. I mean, that is the way to do it in Tyler Lockett. The Seahawks are playing the Eagles this week. But Chuba Hubbard has been getting a lot of touches. I mean, this last couple weeks has been 14, 25, 23. I think for me, I would probably start Chuba, to be honest. I think between these two people, Tyler Lockett is a good own. Tyler Lockett is a good play this week, but we also need to realize that while Tyler Lockett has a good matchup, there's still two very usable other wide receivers, and I think that Chuba has a safer floor than Tyler Lockett does.
I'm kind of torn on this one still, even though I came up with this flex deal. I'm doing it to myself here. I think you go Chuba if you want the stable floor, because he's going to get you a consistent 8 points at least, double-digit points, even maybe 10 points with all the volume
the volume is what is the most enticing for me.
Yeah,
I mean,
the volume is there.
If you're seeing 20 plus touches a game, I want you in my starting lineup.
Yeah, and with Tyler Lockett has an upside in this matchup just with how bad the Eagles secondary is.
Yeah,
because he could easily take one of those targets for 80 yards and a touchdown, and then it's like, well, fuck.
Tyler Lockett has a higher ceiling, but Chuba Hubbard has a safer floor. So I am less risk averse, and so I would take Chuba in this situation. But I think that there is certainly an argument to be made for either.
Yep.
Okay. I brought JSN to the table. I thought this would be a fun one for you because we were talking about Tyler Lockett and the matchup there, and JSN is pretty much the same thing as Tyler Lockett, where like he could be boom or bust. And then you have Devin Singletary playing against the Titans. So which one are you taking?
So we don't have a stable floor here for either of these guys. So throw that out the window. I'm going upside. JSN as the easy target for me. If you want to look at the matchups here, Philly has given up the most points to wide receivers the past 5 weeks at 49.2 PPR points. Yikes. And JSN led all wide receivers last week for Seattle in targets. So he's getting the workload. He's getting volume. I think this matchup is very sexy. I got to go JSN.
What's crazy is in one of the leagues that I made it to the playoffs in, I went and looked at the waiver wire. I own both these players, and I just thought this was hilarious, so I would bring it up as part of the flex appeal. JSN was sitting there on the waiver wire, and I typically am flexing Devin Singletary depending on the week, and I was like, how did anybody let this happen? And I'm playing for a spot to continue along in a chance of getting the trophy in this league. And I was like, dude, you gotta grab JSN. And I grabbed him, and I'm gonna be flexing him this week. And he was just sitting there on the waiver wire, and I'm like, that's crazy to me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is easy. But I'm also choosing JSN. I brought this to the table because I was like, man, this is too funny not to share. So it's got to be JSN for me, and that's why I grabbed him.
Let me know if you have any spots in that league next year.
Yeah, I'm good. It's a family league.
Can't let you have all the fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Slaps. For my last flex appeal, I have OBJ versus Jacksonville or Jaden Reed versus Tampa Bay. Are you going to chase a blow-up game with Jaden Reed, or are you going to roll with OBJ?
Look, man. Jaden Reed might be the only bright spot in an otherwise really sad draft class that I had last season in Dynasty. I like Jaden Reed. He has a special place in my heart because I drafted him late. I blew all my other draft picks, and he's just like the nurturing little child in the corner that I'm like, man, you are making me not want to just jump off a bridge. But you also can't argue with what OBJ's done these last couple weeks. He has been the wide receiver for this team. So my issue is his snap share is not great. His snap share has continued to not be great. It's even with Mark Andrews gone, I was hoping that would increase a little bit. He's on the field usually less than 50% of the time. But the nice thing is when he's on the field, he is getting targets. So I think I'm going to take OBJ here. I think this game's going to be pretty interesting. The Jaguars are not schmucks. I think they're schmucks. I think Sarah Jessica Parker is a schmuck. But I also think that at the end of the day, they are a team that is frisky. They are a team that is going to win games that they shouldn't win, and they're going to lose games that they shouldn't. And so for that reason, it's what version of the Jaguars you're going to get. I think the Ravens are going to have to come out here, and they're going to have to play some good football. So I'll take OBJ in this one.
Oh, we're split again.
Split again.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jaden Reed here, and the reason being is, excuse me. I know last week was
chasing the 10 targets last week.
Yeah, I that's what I was gonna get at. I know I'm chasing the 10 targets, but I think there's something to be said about those 10 targets because Christian Watson was gone last week. He's going to be gone again this week. If you look at how involved Reed was outside of the passing game, they gave him jet sweeps. Like they're drawing up plays for him. So I think LaFleur is looking at Jaden Reed as like, okay, we just need to get this guy involved. And in a matchup versus Tampa Bay where they are going to have to throw the ball in a spot where we just saw Drake London go for nearly 30 points, if I can get somebody who's getting double-digit targets or even 8 to 7 targets that he was seeing without Christian Watson earlier in the season, I'm chasing that. So I'm rolling with Jaden Reed.
You want to know what's interesting is since week 7 this year, Jaden Reed's actually wide receiver 15 on the year. So,
wow.
I mean, we're now in week 15. So for half the season, the second half of the season here, he's really bolstered himself in a very favorable position. I'm still taking OBJ. I do think that he's going to be involved. I think the Ravens really don't have a choice. They're running out of pass catchers, and so I think they're probably going to have to pass the ball a little bit. And so I'm rolling OBJ, but I'm not knocking you for starting Jaden Reed. And like I said, I mean he's a very usable wide receiver too since week 7. So and that was just a number I grabbed. Like you could go back and you can skew the analytics any way you want, but I just found that to be interesting because for the second half of the year, he is a very usable wide receiver too. Yeah. So, all right, last flex appeal I brought for you, my friend. Adam Thielen versus the Falcons or Jerry Jeudy versus the Lions. I picked 2 throw-up guys, and I don't mean throw-up as in like you just throw them up and they put fantasy points up, but more like a throw-up in your mouth. And I'm curious to know which one you're going to choose.
All right. Thank you for doing this to me. I am so happy you brought these 2 to the table. Okay. Now that the throw up's out of my mouth, this is very gross because Adam Thielen, he's slowed down after a top 10 start to the season. Since the week 7 bye, he is the wide receiver 34 on the season.
Wow.
Yikes. So he's fallen out of graces, right, for fantasy owners. But for Jerry Jeudy, I'm sorry if you guys still have him on your team because
I was just gonna say this. I don't know if anybody who is playing fantasy football made it to the playoffs if they're rostering these guys.
Yeah, like Adam Thielen, I understand. Like he was a top 10 wide receiver for a little bit. You're like, you have that emotional attachment to him. You're like, all right, like I got to keep him because if somebody picks him up, he's probably going to blow up for somebody else. I get
That's how it always goes.
But if you love something, you have to set it free.
Bingo.
Watch it come back. Anywho, to get back to this flex appeal, I have to go with Adam Thielen. Jerry Jeudy is just not involved in that offense at all for Denver, and his volume is just, it's non-existent. Courtland Sutton is a true wide receiver one there, and Jerry Jeudy only has 1 touchdown on the season. After being drafted in the 5th to 6th round for a lot of people, he has fallen off the face of the earth.
Isn't it
wide
interesting,
receiver
though?
56 on the season? So.
Like last year, Jerry Jeudy was the wide receiver 1 for the team, and all they did was make a coaching change, and now he is not the wide receiver 1 for the team. So it's pretty interesting. They're also finding more success this year than they were last year. So perhaps that is indicative of what they were doing offensively before that.
Yeah, I think the way that they're using Jerry Jeudy has a lot to do with it. Jerry Judy's kind of their vertical guy, whereas Sean Payton's system is we're going to get you low average depth of target guys, and that's a Courtland Sutton type. He's doing the stuff that's intermittent or under 10 yards for Russell Wilson. And I think that's where Russ is in his career, kind of Drew Brees-esque, where I'm just going to check it down as short as I can and let you do the work.
Yeah.
So.
No, and I don't know. I'm not going to argue that at all. I'll ask you this last question. We'll get the hell out of here. Does Jerry Jeudy get traded this offseason, you think?
God, I hope so. I'm tired of hearing about him like, oh, I want out, or oh, we're going to trade him. I feel like the past 2 seasons, it has.
It's like, we're looking to sell this guy. We're looking to sell this guy, and they don't ever sell him. And then you're like, damn it.
I kind of hope he joins the Chiefs because everybody will get excited and then realize he can't catch a ball.
Okay, well, that would just be right on par with all the Chiefs wide receivers.
Exactly. People would be so hype about it, and then they get him. He plays a couple games, and he has like 10 drops, and they're like, "Oh fuck, okay."
You're like, damn,
just another Chiefs wide receiver.
Well, good thing we don't have Alan and Scotty here, or else they'd probably have some choice words to say.
Love you, boys.
Yeah, love you guys. All right, Yeti, let's get the hell out of here, man. I appreciate you doing this today. All you Brainiacs out there, appreciate you guys listening, tuning in, watching us wherever you might be doing so at. I have one last request for you. Just hit the subscribe button, man. It truly does mean the world. And if you want, give us 5 stars too, because it does help a small podcast such as ourselves. That's all the time we got, buddy. Let's get out of here. We
are
out.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you tune into our new releases every week on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out leatherbrains.com for all of your fantasy football needs. And remember, Brainiacs, a championship should be more than a fantasy.